Hello, hope the stream can hear me. Okay, looks like it's going well. Hi everyone, this is EIPIP meeting number 9. Um, it looks like what we got today is the first agenda item, separation of EIP process from the hard fork process. We made a lot of progress on this last time, so we can start to go over this again. I think, James, you had worked on editing the model, the image after last call, right? Or what was I thinking of Axic doing that?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Do you want to go over that? What's the edits happened and just review kind of based on what we did last time, what edits were made?
Yes. I will just share my screen. Thought I had Axic still on this document, but I'm not seeing it. So I'll need to re-edit it to have his on there, but I can do that while we're talking. I just updated my Zoom, so I'm hoping that this works again.
Great.
I see it.
Sweet. So the one I worked on was this top one, and I went in and added all of the arrows for all the state transitions, so the back and forths. So you can go from idea to draft, and then inactive. I left in an inactive and in withdrawn just so we could talk about it. I don't know whether we should still have two or not, but so that's clear. The and then I need to move this a little bit so I can see it. It's behind my thing. So you can go back, you can go forward to inactive or back to draft, or from inactive to withdrawn, and but then after it's withdrawn, you can't go backwards without making like a new one. Was the thought for that? And then you can go from draft to review, and you can go from review to forward, and that this could go back and forth quite a bit, like between review and last call, or however it needs. Um, oh, I guess I need to also put an arrow here. Being this one is the one that I think the between review and active, that the way active should work is that you do a change to active and then it goes into review, and then after a certain amount, then it goes back to after that the PR is reviewed and edits and stuff go through, that it goes back to active status so people know to go when to look at EIP one, for example. Um, and it's probably good to do. Let's just do quick definitions for everyone to be up to speed what we're talking about. So, ideas pretty obvious. Draft is you become a draft when your formatting is correct and you have all of the requirements for an EIP inside of the EIP itself. That's pretty low, like the quality things and a lot of should it be implemented or not are not at all at this stage. It's just editors making sure that the formatting is correct. And at this stage, it's viewable by people in the EIP repository, and an author or the champion works on it until they get to a spot where they want to have greater review from the community. And this is so then he or she has the ability to change its status to review or request for it to be reviewed. And then that is a request for the community and for other EIP authors saying that this is at a point where I want other people to um, chime in on this EIP and get feedback for more. It's in a more stable state, or it's at least articulated well for people to come in and listen to it. Which after that point, then there's a process of last call, meaning that I'm this is the final proposal for this EIP, and then it goes through a 2-week process of final comments, And if there isn't any, then it goes to final. And what final means in this case is that the specification's complete and the author is happy with how it is defined. It doesn't mean that it's going into anything or that it isn't going into anything. It is a fine. The standardization is it's the state of the art. It's the final state, and that any changes after that point should be done by making another EIP, which supersedes the final EIP. And so then that's how an EIP can be sort of superseded. The last call, this line, it seems we were pretty agreed on or had consensus about that this is a great way to handle this flow. If anyone wants to go more into that, we're welcome to, or if you have someone has a contrary thought to that or thinks that we should have some clarification on some of this, definitely speak up.
My only
Just,
comment
Yep.
is that in between some of the arrows, we need to make sure we put, or maybe by the statuses, put like meta only on active, um, so that people know that active is not an EIP status for just anything. Same thing with superseded. Superseded is never to be used with a meta EIP because can only be active or review.
Oh, that's a good point. Putting like a subtag of meta in here would be in like italics would be really good.
Yep. And then yeah,
uh,
that's all I had.
again, what is active and inactive? I just didn't get the idea.
I didn't really describe them yet, so that would be how that fits. So active is a special status. It's a weird name, but it's related primarily to things like meta EIP registries, like the EFI document. What EIPs are on EFI that shouldn't ever be finalized. That's a rolling document. It's a living document that's continually updated, and so we should expect that it is something that is updated semi-regularly or when necessary, depending on what the registry is. And EIP1 is another example of kind of this special kind of EIP where the idea is that it's never finished. It's designed to be editable and to have changes made to it. So having it go through last call and final doesn't make sense because we're not going to make another EIP1. We're going to continually edit EIP1.
So maybe the better name for it would be rolling, then, like rolling release of the of Linux distributions. Like the whole idea that the release is never finished; it's continuously updated. So it's yeah.
I think rather than renaming that one, I almost want to rename inactive. And the reason is because inactive and active are not related at all. In fact, they're on totally different EIP tracks, but people may conflate them for the fact that they are generally mean opposites of each other. So making inactive like a name like stagnant seems a little bit more straightforward in my opinion. But Artem, can you elaborate on why you would want to rename active?
Well, because for me, active, when I first looked at this diagram today, I thought that active means deployed on the Ethereum mainnet. And I guess this is the first thing that many people would assume, that it's this EIP is active, it's live on the network.
I guess, yeah, because it's different from accepted, right? Like, because in the past we had accepted prior to being on the network, and then final meant it was live on the network. So
Yep.
do you feel, Artem, do you feel this like accepted has the same connotation? And if not, is there a reason to not change it to that?
I guess that at least for the newcomer, both all accepted and final, and in this case active, they are all confusing.
Yeah,
I can agree with that. Yeah.
That's been my experience in trying to describe the EIP process. Usually involves specifically talking about those words in specifics.
So active, so there's just, at the glance, there's just not enough distinction between active and final. Like, like you said, it's like accepted, very, very much like accepted.
I'm just Googling synonyms for that, and
Yeah.
I'm not finding anything for active that's good. I found some stuff for inactive, like
We could call it rolling.
I like rolling. I think because this is a technical specifications like repository, so rolling could be a good one. I'm not like opposed to it yet or anything.
Rolling instead of active?
Yes.
Yes.
I had thought of I think the best descriptive term would be living document. That doesn't fit in a status
That
well.
living works too, I suppose.
Just the word living. And
Oh,
actually,
that's actually good.
yeah, living. And then what do people think of inactive changing to stagnant? Or I guess we could keep it inactive if we're changing active, but
Stagnant works better.
Living, I don't know. Anyways, living seems a bit weird to me, but it's kind of a small.
It does seem weird, but it's also a weird status.
Well, I don't know. I
Yeah.
feel like accepted actually defines it pretty well, right? Like where I guess final is basically that though. Yeah, I don't know.
But accepted sounds like it's like what accepted into what? First thoughts for Ethereum improvement proposals. Oh, it's accepted into Ethereum, which is accepted into mainnet,
Yeah.
which implies a lot of stuff, and can be confusing.
And what does and I guess what are the cases, sorry, where it goes to active or living or whatever, but it doesn't go to final?
The EIP1, meta EIPs, they don't go to final.
I'd previously suggested registry since it's kind of meant for registries.
But I think that is. I'm not totally convinced that we're only going to have registries yet.
and it's actually EIP1 is a meta EIP, and that's not a registry. So
Yeah.
EIP1 wouldn't have a place to live. So the chat has some stuff.
Oh, good.
Alita
I
said,
can't
I like
see it.
stagnant, and then when I heard of active, it's as if it's running on mainnet, and final as if it's in final draft. That's a good point.
And then this version. Oh, sorry. Keep going.
Oh, the only other comment was active to vital. Changing the word active to vital was Pooja's idea.
It would give wrong connotation to it. I mean, vital to what?
To me seems like you can't take it out of the network, or like you'll break the network or something.
You misspelled vital.
Yeah, Oh, you guys can see what I'm doing. I did. There is a vitae. Is like the Latin word for living.
Let's just call it living document, and it would instantly convey the meaning to users and wouldn't confuse anyone.
I'm for living. Yeah.
I mean, you will still have to if you call it something else, you will still have to explain that. Oh, this means that it is a living document.
Why not something like reference? Right? Like it's like a reference implementation. When it gets final, it means it kind of can't change anymore. But I don't know, like reference or something that just kind of highlights what it is rather than like maybe necessarily the state. I'm not sure if this is a good idea.
I don't think that's a good idea to deviate from the fact that these are all statuses, and then one of them just being a descriptor or more of a descriptor than a status. Sense.
Yeah.
I'm good with living document. I don't think like too many syllables is a problem, since I don't think it'll be used much.
And then Alita said final to staged. Maybe.
I think
So,
final should
not necessarily staged. I mean, I guess that's the next topic or another topic, but the EIPs in general are just building blocks for Ethereum ecosystem. And if we make any EIP final, if we accept it into this toolbox, doesn't mean that it is staged for, say, inclusion into the Ethereum mainnet. So that's that applies to things like click, opt, ProcPow, but whatever. That's another topic.
Yeah, and I think final, like the definition is literally the spec will not change anymore unless for typos. And I think I feel pretty strongly we should keep it as such, because it's also it's also something that's really distinct from the deployment, right? Because we can say this EIP is final. So for example, the ProgPow EIP is final, the spec is done, but that's independent of the stage at which it is with regard to like a mainnet deployment.
Interesting. Okay, and then finally, yeah, I think so. Your main point, Tim, was to separate the so these statuses should separate the hard fork process from the EIP process of what statuses they are. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Yeah, I think it should be clear that like these are EIP statuses and not hard forks. Whereas like say eligible for inclusion sounds way more, hard fork process, right?
Yep.
And then I think if you wanted to be coherent, you could say something like included, once it gets scheduled for a fork, and deployed once it's live on mainnet, or something like that.
Got it. Okay. And then inactive to stagnant, would that be something that anyone disagrees on? Because I heard 3 people say that was better than inactive.
The intention for inactive was if a certain amount of time has passed and the EIP has been inactive or not, or I guess stagnant is another word you could use, then it's put into this stage, which means, and it was automatic, it was by the system automatically put into this stage because of inactivity. So it seemed pretty descriptive, but I'm more tied to the function than what it's called.
About this status, when we put it inactive, and after certain point of time, if somebody would want, they may activate it again. So I find stagnant more appropriate. Like inactive defines it as it's going to be inactive like forever, maybe.
And also, inactive implies that there is an active state, and there isn't.
Okay. I'll concede to that.
Okay. Alita. Oh, Alita, is it okay if I keep just relaying your chat messages? Because you're welcome to also jump on mic.
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry,
Okay.
I just don't want to interject.
Okay, no problem. So final to final locked. Just final doesn't clearly convey its immutability. Oh. That's an interesting point.
I would, if we were talking about mainnet stuff, I would be more tended to agree with that. I think leaving it a standard as being final is articulated well enough, or is clear enough on its own. There's one more inactive somewhere.
Okay,
Oh,
do we have
wow.
other comments on any of this? I think we've done a really good job figuring out where things should go. I just saw like a major arrow change. Was that because we changed the length of a word?
Yes, that's because I'm trying to switch out inactive for stagnant.
Okay.
And it automatically formats, so it then had both. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I think the last thing to talk about is, is stagnant and withdrawn necessary, or do we just have one?
I think
So
oh, go ahead.
I actually think it's good to have two, because stagnant implies soft inactivity, and then withdrawn like assumes finality. So it might be good to add finality to the inactive statuses.
Yeah, withdrawn is purposefully withdrawn is purposefully making the EIP permanently inactive, whereas stagnant is inactivity due to defaults in time past. So we wouldn't want stagnant or withdrawn to be the only one, because then the person wouldn't know if it's permanent and the person wouldn't know if it just lapsed over time or not, which is important to make a distinction of if you want to resurrect it and become a new champion of it, for instance, because that happens a lot with EIPs, or new champions come in.
Can't withdrawn EIPs get new champions? That's my one question. And another question, do we want to only have withdrawn but not rejected? So what if we decline to move the EIP from the review to last call and to final?
The first one, if an EIP is, if I withdrew an EIP and someone wants to be a champion of it, I think they should make a different EIP.
Yeah, I think like also just politically, it makes a huge difference to just say, you know, this is the new proposal for X, and this is what we've done in the past as well. Like when we fixed like EIP 1283, the other EIP kind of combined both the original one and the fix into one. So I think it's simpler to like say this is a new EIP which replaces this previous one, rather than we're kind of retaking this old EIP.
Yeah, and here I wrote in from stagnant, you can go back to draft. So if someone just dropped it, you can pick it back up, start it back again. But if someone purposefully stopped and withdrew, then to have to continue that EIP, you would make a new EIP and have it start as draft with a different number.
So we're not addressing the fact that you can explicitly reject an EIP within these statuses?
Rejecting an EIP really doesn't come up unless we're talking about mainnet. Is it?
Yeah, I think
the standard, you could write whatever you want for a standard. There's really no reason to reject a standard unless it's like malformed, but even then it would just most likely go to stagnant after a while and then disappear.
Yeah, but I think in the hard fork process, you should have a rejected, so it kind of goes from eligible for inclusion to like included or rejected, and then the mainnet, right?
Yeah, and last week I had a very long conversation with Bryant, and I think I've been convinced that it's better to have keeping track of what's on mainnet be part of the hard fork process and kept out of this entirely.
So even though it's kept out of this, if I'm just a person reading the EIP repository and I'm like, okay, EIP 972, I want to see if that's ever been included in a hard fork. Will I need to go through every meta, or will that be in the header? Or every hard fork meta, I should say. How will I be able to quickly ascertain that a core EIP has made it into a fork or not? I know there's a separate process, but I don't want to have to dig through a separate process necessarily if it's not very well defined what EIPs went into where.
Mm-hmm. I think there's two ways to solve that. I'm not sure which one fits, and that's a big open question. One would be at the status level of having a status that says that this is live on mainnet, like it's been implemented, so that people know this is something that's part of Ethereum, and then the other one would be to have a document or a registry that tracks these are all the EIPs on mainnet, and have that be a registry EIP that's tied to the hard fork process. That would be at least my suggestion. I don't know, like we should go over pros and cons of both or alternate suggestions.
Yeah, and I think the use cases may be a little bit like weird. Like I feel like people will either care about what's in the hard fork, and then they can, find a hard fork, or they'll care about a specific EIP. But I think the use case would say, I don't know, you wanted to see is EIP XYZ included in a hard fork, you just go to the place where the hard fork process is defined, Command F or whatever the EIP number is, and you should be able to find it there. But I think having a status to say it's included kind of goes against the whole purpose of separating the EIP process from the hard fork process.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit confused. I assume that this diagram that we are discussing currently, this process, is only about inclusion into our EIP toolbox, so to speak, not deployment on any network. So
that's how I see it as well. And I think
it's figuring out what that means, and then what do we do?
Yeah.
What do we do about keeping track of what's live?
I think we all agree on that. It's just that was one of the two ways to do it that James said. But yeah, I like the registry idea better. That also makes it so that people can look up everything, because I see the EIP repository as a little bit more than just something that lists out specifications. It's kind of something that also is used by people to replace the yellow paper at times, to look up the latest network stack of like ETH 65 or whatever. I forgot what they're called. So like the networking layer, but also like how to implement EIPs based on the rules of the EIP. So even though we don't want to facilitate the EIP process directly saying what is in mainnet, having a registry is a good in between.
That registry would be another EIP, I assume, and it would follow the same path as that we have been discussing for the past half an hour.
It would follow. Go ahead.
It would be a living document. So it would be like EIP1 and the eligible for inclusion EIP.
It'd be similar to this. And yes, be tagged as living.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot. Does anyone else have comments on this? The graph, the things we've been talking about, stuff like that? Because we can move on to the other agenda items. If not, it sounds like we're slowing down on this and came to a few really good decisions.
I have a question about, am I on mute? Okay, you can hear me. What about ones that are like recovery of funds? Like, is it EIP 999, which was rejected, but wonder if someone had a powerful, I'm just hypothesizing here, had a powerful consensus building tool, and they could start building consensus, and if they could definitively show that, say, greater than 90% of everyone, 90% of the Ether, 90% of the core devs, and everyone was on board with moving that from withdrawn back to active, or something like that, and getting something approved simply because they could definitively prove that everyone was on board with that. Is that something that we don't want to consider in here, or is that
not to change withdrawn to anything? They would just, in that case, if it's already been withdrawn by the author, they would need to create an entirely new one in that situation, in that scenario you're laying out.
Okay, cool, thanks.
And the part about getting consensus from the network to implement is all on the hard fork implementation layer, not on the standardization layer. Like you don't need consensus to define the standard for your EIP. You can just make it and then have it be the best that you can think of, and then all of the other stuff happens in the parallel process.
Okay, yeah, I think I understood that. Thanks.
Okay, anything else? And then otherwise I'll move on to the next thing.
I have a very peculiar question. So if we don't have the EIP process tied to the deployment on the mainnet, so will EIPs go through any scrutiny by the core developers?
Yes.
The reason they would go through, when you say they would go through scrutiny or not, do you mean
clarify, that would be helpful.
Yeah, like, do you mean what do we define the decision-making process and the standardization process we're talking now?
Yeah, so basically, what would be the bar for moving the EIP into last call and into final?
That would be.
I guess this is an open-ended question, but yeah, I expect that this bar would be lower.
For core EIPs specifically, it would be the first step would be eligible for inclusion, and that would be someone has made an idea, created a draft, and then said, my draft is at the point where I want to consider doing things like test implementations that are really rough, stuff like that. And then from there, if the core devs say, yes, this meets the standards for EFI, this is something that could definitely go in, then it would go from there to like further implementations, and then into that would be almost the review phase at that point, depending on how the core devs want to do it. And that's like a whole nother, that's kind of outside the scope of what we're talking about today, but it is a really good question, I think, because
Yes.
this needs to be decided along with the statuses so that the statuses don't impede that process.
I think your point, Artem, that it's easier to go from review to last call to final is definitely the case, and I think that's fine. That's part of the difficult part previously was the political part / core dev, including in mainnet part. So having that not be a requirement to get to final means it's easier to get to the final stage. For if someone wants their EIP to get into mainnet, then there's the whole other process that Hudson was talking about of getting it through EFI, getting it through all of these things. You wouldn't be able to get it into mainnet without going through this plus doing that extra effort. And here actually the review, I think, means that they'll get better scrutiny earlier, because something we've had previously is an EIP goes for quite a long time in development and the authors are working on it, and then at the tail end, then everyone looks at it, or at least they're like the scrutiny is really delved in at when I finally put hey, we're thinking about doing this when. So here with review, it's a little bit of combination of this will help focus conversation on EIPs from the core devs and the community as they are ready to be talked about. And then even though, I think Greg's EIP is actually a good example of this. Sorry if this is a little bit of a tangent. But his EIPs for doing the subroutines, like what he has proposed is a well thought out, like you could say it's a standard and we could make it be a final one. There are some additional concerns that the core devs have related to it, like should we have more restrictions or not when it comes to deploying to mainnet. So in Greg's case, it would be easier for it to get to final, which is nice for him because he has a thing that he's trying to get done and implemented and worked. And then other people who want to add on and build on it can do that. But it means he doesn't have to go back and forth forever trying to make what works for the core devs or for the rest of them. He can get to a finished product, and then additional things that need to be done. So it's being implemented into the FNet that's coming up. And at that stage, we could say like at some point, hey, this is good, but there's some extra things that need to be done before it goes into mainnet. And we could either, now I'm rambling a little bit, but I hope that has a bit more pieces that are helpful. Did that answer any of your concerns?
One thing I wanted to add was that I think having the EIPs be able to be fast tracked to final is kind of considered a feature, because if you have an EIP in final and it's rejected by the hard fork coordination process, then they can make a version 1.1 quickly to try to address any concerns brought up.
Are they able to do that? Because once it's in final, there's not a way to go back to draft or review.
Yeah. So when I say 1.1, I mean a new EIP that's the same name. That's just version 1.1 with a new EIP number.
Ah, got it. Okay. Um, yeah. I'll let Artem answer anything else before I go to my next thing, because that was his questions were initially this.
Yeah, I mean that's a bit concerning that you can have like a final EIP that will go on a test net, and then suddenly on a test net you discover issues, and then you have to do another EIP to replace it. So it feels like a lot of boilerplate, but
yeah,
yes,
maybe it should be
necessary.
like, I don't know, like I shared something in the chat, but like almost like our last call for core EIPs should include the testnet period. So it's like you have, I don't know, you have like last call all the way up to it's deployed on mainnet, and then it becomes final. Yeah, I don't
But
know.
some EIPs are never to be meant to be deployed on the mainnet.
Yeah, sure.
Like
But
Click,
I'm
for
talking about
example.
core EIPs, right? Like, oh, so you're saying, but yeah, Click is a core EIP. I mean, I don't know. For those, maybe we just still move them to final. You have the standard 2 weeks last call.
Yeah, you can make, I mean, I could make something called the icebreaker format, and it like completely redefines how you do account abstraction, or I'm just throwing words around, and it could go to last call and then final, as long as there is like the core devs say yes, that can go to final, but that doesn't mean it's included in a hard fork ever. So Click, for instance, is a good example of that. The networking protocols are a good example of that, because sometimes, like, I think in the case of ETH, was it 64, 65, or some 64 and 65? Like, some clients actually skipped one of the networking protocols to go to the latest one. That might have been Open Ethereum, actually. I forgot.
No, we introduced ETH64 in 3.0, and we are currently implementing ETH65.
Okay. So and there was another client that just skipped it. So that doesn't mean that either a networking protocol or a core EIP, either one of those could go into a hard fork, but it can still be final. And I think we're going to have to drive that point home, because that's going to be confusing, especially since final up till now, or including now, means that it went into a hard fork. So we're redefining the term.
Just a small note. Networking EIPs and networking protocol it's a bit orthogonal to the hard forks, because it does not affect the chain state, only how the clients talk to each other. So it doesn't require a hard fork deployment, and it doesn't affect the chain state. So it doesn't require a separate inclusion process.
That is a good point, and that's why if on EIP1 right now, networking is actually a separate category within the standard tracks of EIP. So yeah, I think, are you going to EIP1 right now, James?
Yeah, I just need to get to this part of the screen where I can get to it. Ta-doom.
So yeah, there's EIP types. So there's a standard track EIP, and networking is separate from core, and it's exactly what you said, Artem. It's because it's separate. It's consensus critical as core, and networking is not critical. And then Tim, you have to leave in a minute, but Tim posted a picture in chat that kind of described a little bit of the EFI process.
So I think, yeah, the short answer there is I think like the EFI should basically operate ideally like in between the EIP stages, right? And it's, anyways, like, so you have like an EIP that's first a draft, and then it can be made like EFI, and then when it goes into review, then it can be, after that it can be included, and when it goes into last call, then I don't know, we can put it on testnet, and when it's final, it means it's deployed. But I think it would be good that there's still like a link between, you know, when does like the hard fork process, which stages of the EIP process does the hard fork process like hook into? Because then it makes it kind of.
I'm sorry, I'd rather call it not included, but staged, because it's a
Sure,
bit
sure,
confusing.
yeah. I mean, it's just because we use eligible for inclusion, so I use included. But like whatever that, I don't have a strong opinion on the name, but just mostly of like how the two processes kind of interact with each other. And yeah, on that I have to jump though. So yeah, thanks everybody.
Bye, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay. Okay, this was all really good. Any final stuff before we move on to the next item? Okay, so the next item is an EIP number registry process that's a lot better than what we have now. Does anyone have thoughts on a better process? And also, I guess we should go over what we currently have. Right now, I believe it's by PR number, right?
Yep. There's a little piece of EIP1 that is not very well talks. It does not we don't really even follow well, but it says that after an EIP is implemented, then and after an EIP is put as a PR, then an EIP editor gives it a number, and the number usually references the PR number. What actually happens is you do a PR, you go backwards, you figure out what number it is, then you put the IP number in, and then that's the only way to get it through the editor, the edit bot, because you have to make sure you have the formatting correct.
Okay. Is there a better way that people can think of? I actually am okay with the PR number thing, because it's an unlimited number set, and I can't think of an alternative.
Yeah, I mean, I have the same basic opinion that it's pretty awkward, and it ties us to the platform, basically to GitHub pull requests, but then there is just no better way. So
I assume that just confirm, are we talking about the labeling or the numbering?
Yes, the numbering. So, like, if I make a draft EIP and then I make a pull request for that draft EIP, that PR number in GitHub is what is going to define my EIP number within that draft.
Okay. So the reason that I brought up changing it in the, or one of the reasons I brought it up was because at least with the Zcash model, they use different numbers to signify different states of the process, and different purposes of the actual draft. So if we had, say, you could have the same labeling scheme, so that way it's that we have right now, so that way it's unique. But then you have like a dash, 0, whatever, that signifies whether or not it's in the stagnant phase, or if it's currently, or if it applies to the networking or something else of that effect.
That's an interesting idea. I think I love how Zcash does it, from at least from my review of the numbering. However, they what they do, if I remember correctly, is for things like if it is a consensus critical change, for instance, it's numbers 100 through 199. If it's a networking change, it's 200 to 299. And the problem with that is we have so many that we can't define a preset range like they can, because they have many fewer EIP, or they have many fewer zips than we do EIPs. But I don't think you weren't saying that we should do it exactly like that, but maybe include dashes that indicate some other fact about that EIP, like a what category it's in and stuff like that. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can take, just like an extension, as it were, just like a classification, which would be variable as like throughout the process, and presumably that would help maintain history of the process as well. So you could say, for example, have the 0 through 90 be if it's whatever, and then each change that's accepted or reviewed increments that extension by 1, something like that.
It might add like an unnecessary level of complexity, especially since we already have statuses defining where it is.
As I recall, the statuses were in the header of the EIP, which which in my opinion is difficult to comprehend or read, but I suppose I haven't championed an EIP.
Oh, go ahead, James.
I'm a little hesitant for that, and I think it has to do with, one, we have way better defined statuses. Like this is pretty comprehensible. I'm looking at all the draft EIPs and how they're organized. Things like having the number be the link is very easy to handle. I don't know if we add any, I guess I don't see what we get specifically out of having more, using the number system to better specify the statuses when we have the statuses.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I see it both ways, but so
Yeah,
I don't really know where I
haven't.
fall.
So I don't think I've thought about that enough to really. I want to think about that more.
So the primary reason why I believe it would be why it would be beneficial is if we have a lot of EIPs, it's easy to say query the EIPs to sort only certain categories or certain state EIPs.
So you're saying having an extension to the EIP number would make it, that people have hard time understanding, would make it easier than just having a simple status field with well-defined values?
That is what I'm saying, yeah.
I guess I'm having trouble seeing that.
If we had the numbers have more information beyond the status, that might add something as far as from like a querying ability, like filtering the way that these are organized, filtering by their status actually isn't really that difficult. Like I wouldn't need to have if I was to write a system to get all of the draft EIPs for networking, I wouldn't need any other information to do that pretty easily, like writing a script to do that, because this is really strict on what the inputs are. So if I think we would need to think of more things that the numbers would signify that are helpful to have but don't deserve their own status, then I think that would make more sense. That's at least where my mind's going currently. I don't want to say anything super definitive.
Yeah. Go ahead.
With regards to the number being tied to the PR and issue number, Axic in the previous meeting brought up the using a smart contract to choose the number. I'm not sure if that's too complex, or if we should continue using PR numbers for the EIP number.
I don't see what problem that solves immediately.
That is a lot more complexity. So reasons I think the EIP number process sucks or is really unhelpful is the inflation of, because it's tied into the GitHub issues, we get weird things where, well, one, people come in, do 10 issues so that they get a good number. And that just floods the EIP repository with random issues for no reason, other than someone wanted 5 instead of 3. Or they wait until 1770 like leet. And we've seen that a bunch of times happen already in the EIP repo, which is adding more things onto EIP editors and making it harder to manage the repository. For me, I've wanted to go in and make a lot of little changes to like updates to EIPs. Like if I was going to change the status, it would be nice if I did a lot of changes, but I am hesitant to do 100 PRs because I've immediately bumped the number because I wanted to have a couple things changed on a lot of ones so they could be decided individually. So then I start packaging things together, which has its own like weird incentive, like a weird not incentivization, but like I think you get what I'm saying. Like it's pulling my thought process into a weird place because of trying to work within the thing itself. It's confusing, like having huge gaps in numbers is confusing, I think, to people who, it's like, well, why do we have EIP 2000 and then EIP 2150? That's like more of a just general reason, but not like a super hard reason, I would say, not to do it. How I've so I would say it's a big deal that we figure out a way to do this that isn't tied to the using GitHub issues, because it would free up GitHub issues to be used for a lot of other things.
You mean PRs, right? Not issues?
Well, yeah, because PRs turn into issues. So you're actually using the issue number, because PRs go by the sequential including issues.
Ah, that's right. Okay.
Personally, I would just turn off GitHub issues for the EIP repo and put the pull request submission behind some kind of a bot. So you could, so people would have an interface to submit an EIP, and the bot would just submit it as a pull request, and maybe give that author the rights to the created pull request.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Yep.
I've thought about stuff like that a little bit before.
Yeah, getting the bot to be better, stuff like that would be amazing. I thought of a proposal for choosing numbers or having numbers, and having an EIP registry of EIP numbers. And then when I write an EIP, I go in and I request this number. I get the next number, and then the editors are the ones that say, yep, okay, because they are the ones who hit the merge button. When an EIP is formatted enough for them to merge it, then they can assign it a number and then just have it be in a list that goes sequentially.
Interesting.
So part of the process for an author, like, it's a weird flow for me as an author to write an EIP, submit the PO, like put a placeholder tag for the number because I don't know what it's going to be. Then when I hit, I have to submit my PR first before I know what the number is. And so then I go back in afterwards and make all the edits, and then do another, like edit that PR afterwards to be able to get the number. It would be a lot easier for me as from an editor perspective to sit down, write an EIP, go to the EIP registry, say, oh, this is the next one, write in that number, hit merge, and then the draft, and then that's just ready to go. So you apply as for a number through a PR to the registry for EIP numbers.
Yeah, I don't have an opinion yet on that.
So why don't we currently just use a like a system where, say, we have 10 numbers, and then for each time you request a number, you just increment by 1. Is that not a reliable method?
Well, the problem is tracking the increment by 1. Because they're, without having a way to track the current number and what's the next number, then there isn't really a way to increment.
So are you saying basically to use a hub, or like almost like a proxy to manage that?
So,
or a repository?
Yeah, so we would have a list here of EIP numbers and the EIP, and then the date it was assigned if we wanted to. And so then that would be the registry of EIP numbers, and you would, part of the process of submitting an EIP is registering for a number.
Okay. Who'd be responsible for the registry of numbers? The editors, I guess?
Yep.
I'll think about this more. And we have 1 minute left if there's any final comments on this talking point.
Yeah, it's just feels like GitHub is. I don't know if GitHub is like the best solution for EIP management in general, but yeah, there's not like I have an alternative right now.
Yeah, I agree. It has its ups and downs for sure. Okay.
Like clunky.
Yeah. Yeah. We need like a front end like you were talking about to make it more streamlined. Okay. I think we should wrap up then. We have a little less than a minute left, if even that. So let's get to the other topics next time by moving them up the list. Um, it looks like the other two topics weren't super there. Oh, the EIPIP survey though. We have a new document on that. If Edson, do you want to run through that real quick?
Yeah, so this is probably going to be published on Friday. It's in the Telegram. I can post it in the chat. It just summarizes the results in the form of questions. Say we're almost done creating the EIP process statuses separate from the hard fork process. We could start formalizing the hard fork process, and then after we finish that, we go through the last questions in part one, and then we could just choose which questions to go for as topics for these discussions. That makes sense.
Yeah,
But
I think so.
yeah, go through the article if you haven't already. It'll be public on Friday.
Okay.
And I think that's it for me.
Thanks. I thought this was a really good meeting. I'm really excited about the progress we've made, and the next meeting is going to be June 17th, I believe. Yeah, June 17th. So everyone have a great day or evening. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.